course, much more flexible one. So this presentation, when you asked me first to, what I can give during this session, and specifically that they are working and they are discussing about regeneration and heritage and post-war, reconstruction context. The best that I could find, it was more to share, to combine between a little bit of our ongoing work, how, I will explain it through the presentation, how we're trying now to get a different approach towards what we are doing. And at the same time, of course, sharing one of the projects that is still we are working on, because such projects, of course, they are not, they should take a longer time to be developed. So I will share my screen, and of course, this it means that we will have time more to discuss about more ideas during the Q&A session. So here we go. Up. So can you see all my screen? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So for those without a place, this is how I call the presentation of today. And of course, within and with the connection with your ongoing project, which is the rehabilitation of urban heritage in the cities of Iraq, which led me to choose one of the case studies, SIWA Oasis. So for those without a place, in reality, it's a provocative title, and at the same time, a kind of status quo of what is happening worldwide today, despite all what with the narratives that are more highlighted on within the research and within the mainstream media and spaces of anti-fragility. This is concept that we will have the opportunity probably to discuss more during our Q&A session to understand deeply this, let's say, concept of anti-fragility and how anti-fragility, which is, of course, we borrowed from another field of discipline, how it could be in a certain way representative of our kind of unscientific tools and unscientific practices nowadays to tackle these challenges. So basically, for those without a place and spaces for anti-fragility, is more an invitation today from all of you, an invitation from myself that we necessarily need two things. We need to deconstruct. It's an invitation for deconstruction and an invitation for reconstruction. So an invitation to deconstruction of perception, deconstruction of our knowledge that we have, deconstruction of our methodologies, and of course, a deconstruction of practice. And this is a huge already work to be done to be able then to go within the phase of reconstruction and reconstruction again of the perception, the knowledge, the methodology, and the practice. And this is something that needs from us a more awareness about the words that we use and the way how we treat the data that we read or the project that we are dealing with and our communities, wherever. It's a global, actually, invitation. So what is said about SIWA, SIWA Oasis, and how it is represented? And here I choose very carefully my words. It's what is really said about it, because in reality, there is a difference between what is said and what is represented and how it's, been analyzed, and the reality of the field of somebody who, of course, within the process of deconstruction of his own perception. So how SIWA is marketed today in the scientific field and then within the project and abroad. So SIWA Oasis, if you're not familiar with it, SIWA Oasis, it's we call it an oasis, but it's actually a very active hub since the antiquities and through time. It has 7,000 years of existence as a community. It is situated 50 kilometers from the Libyan, of course, borders, and 500 from the Mediterranean Sea, and 600 from Cairo, the capital of Egypt. And of course, it belongs to Egyptian state, and especially in Matruh, governorate. And the situation of SIWA, this is how it brings in reality and put the foundation of all the challenges that this community was facing and they are facing today, and will be facing in the future. And SIWA Oasis, it's part at the same time of what today it's a protected area. It's called SIWA protected area, which it's an area beyond the boundaries of the oasis itself. And of course, we can discuss later why. I will not go deeper in this. And of course, Siwa Oasis, it involves, or a protected area, it involves a lot of sites, a lot of other villages, a lot of other settlements, and a lot of other resources, natural and also military base. As you can see it, it has a situation that is very, very strategic, despite its history. We heard a lot about Siwa Oasis. Siwa Oasis, it's kind of, you know, how we call it déclencheur, or it's the way, an invitation for us to dream. When we talk about Siwa Oasis, we talk about, you know, the oracle of Amun, about Alexander the Great, because most of the people said that he finally, you know, have been buried there. And some people would say that he then met, you know, the oracle, and he knows that his father was alive, etc. And of course, Siwa Oasis has loads of other stories, like we say here, and it has been, you know, a source of how we call it, adoration from the Westerns when they discovered, you know, especially Egypt. That we have poems, we have stories, we have, this is how the story in reality, what we call it today, history of Siwa, have been written. It has been written not by the locals or by the, let's say, the Egyptians themselves, because of course it's an area that has been until very recently all the time invaded even by the Egyptian state because of the resistance of its inhabitants, and this is what shapes also its built environment and has affected a lot about what worldwide what we consider as a world heritage. So here the neighbors had to knock on the door, and we had to allow them to enter or not to, and if they did, they had to vote to pass. So here we can see a little bit that the deepness of the different rules and the different, you know, making this Siwa oasis as a kind of a heaven of mythologies, whether Roman, Egyptian, etc. in the future. So of course, what if you dig more about Siwa oasis, you will see that most of the cases we talk more about particular heritage sites, which in reality, like Hegel said, monuments. So we are here exactly on the monuments definition of heritage. And of course, here we will see that there is the Temple of Amun, we have the Jebel Dakrur, we have Cleopatra Springs, we have Shali, we have Jebel al Mauta, etc. These are the main spots, of course, that created a kind of itinerary. And you can see that has a lot of echoes on how also the urban settlements have been developed through time. And we have a quite interesting combination between natural, in reality, cultural heritage and a built heritage in itself. Siwa Oasis at the same time, you know, it was gifted by a lot of resources that we can't really find in other areas around the world. That's why it has been a lot of medical tourism have been developed within, especially by its salt lakes and some kind of, you know, sand baths, because in reality the geology of the sites of Siwa has a particular material that allowed them to have few medical or a lot of medical features to attract people internationally, and of course recently from having this internal tourism. So these sites, it has been also you know, additional to a very particular, you know, building techniques, what some will call vernacular architecture, which I'm not, I don't agree with that. So the karshif in itself, it's a material that is local, was local. Today, it's, of course, it's very scarce due to the exploitation. And the karshif, it's a material, it's normally a salted, actually, it's a combination between sand, minerals, and salt. So we are knowing the karshif and also the sand bricks that they used to build their houses before. And to understand that, I will take a little bit, you know, of time to explain for you The reason in reality to choose these materials, of course, it was because it was available. So that has been a development of knowledge locally by the locals. And this is what we call them the technology, a local technology that they acquire and help them to build these materials. And of course, parallel to this, of course, a maintenance and a whole system to maintain these houses and to build them, and typologies have been developed. So in reality, there is more than a building materials or techniques to understand, because they are basically very fundamentally linked to a social structure and a way to transfer knowledge from generation to generation. And it's very specific as well. As I said, it's 7,000 years of existence with a lot of invasions and a lot of shifts and a lot of movement. So these people are nomads in reality, and we'll see it furthermore. So they have, in a certain way, by choice, decided to have a materials that doesn't last through time. And of course, it creates a sign kind of, it has been read and it has been seen by the romantics people, scientists, etc., as something that is have a very aesthetic qualities, something that is different. And this is what brings a lot of people to really have the urge to ask for preservation and restoration, renovation, etc., etc., and to learn more about it. And this part of as I said, this act of build or act of construction, it has been always been a matter of the inhabitants themselves. They were the ones who built. And of course, you can see from my speech that this is no longer exists today. It's something that, like you see here, the Ustad Yusuf, he passed away this year. He was around 90 years, and we all, like the last 10 years, we're trying to visit as much as we can to learn from him, because he was one of the main pillars. And Layla, she knows that. She met him with me several times, that we learn how to build this and to learn from him. It was mouth to mouth, hand to hand, and it was very powerful. And I think here, just to drag your attention about the strongs of this memory, because as Layla, she smiled, and myself, this is what brings us at a certain moment to understand the value and the strength of what it is a heritage from an inside view rather than from the outsiders that is very disciplined way of looking to definitions. So of course, this availability and these techniques of building materials that we can find not only in Siwa, it's very common, especially in the Berber, let's say, communities all along the North Africa, and goes really very far to Asia. This is in reality have been many times tried to sustain, so it became the folklore. Today, when you build a hotel or a spa or any kind of housing, when you have, of course, the money for it, you will be kind of driven to get such results in the building, in a way to mimic uh, these memories and not really the realities. And sometimes the mimicry goes beyond that to be only a facade, and what is inside is completely different. It's not even really the true kashif. Something to beyond also this build environmental heritage, architectural heritage, we have what Siwa oases have been also gifted with, 300 springs of fresh water. It's not any simple oasis. It's a very industrialized one. It's a really the production of Siwa oasis in terms of dates and in terms of water, fresh water. It goes beyond to all over the world. You can find many foreign industries, companies that are established in Siwa, and where the most of the population who have a high rate of dropouts from school, they work from that. So it's a very, very important commercial hubs in the ancient world, and it continues until today. So this is something that, of course, it went through the time, and today it's jeopardized and threatened, of course, from the exploitations. And you can see that has this kind of industrial activities to maintain it. The government or the local community and even international ones, they have been developing a quite of economic financial models through festivals like the first Date Palm Festival to keep the community all the time focused on this activity related to dates, to all this ecosystem production, like from the wreaths, the baskets, etc. And as you can see from the photos here, it's very folkloric. It's really, we set a lot, even these people, you can see them with suits, with jeans and with their smartphones, but in reality, during this 10 days, you can see them completely, wearing other type of clothes and trying to keep up, which is really interesting because of course, it's one of the events to revive and to these costumes and this cultural heritage and to keep up this spirit among them. Siwian are very close as a community and very, very tight with each other, and we'll see how. And of course, here, one of the main beyond the dates, it's the olive oil and the olives. It's one of the unique salted olives planted in the world. They have really a very unique technique to harvest. And this makes it like it's a knowledge, local knowledge to give them more, assets to drag more and more investors to it. And it's not, as you can see, it's not all the time a good thing to have such richness and diversity, because it's in reality, this is the way how we read it through our experience, because we talk here about not a project that we just worked on. Siwa Oasis has an echo in our lives, and it's not only the Oasis itself, but the people in it. And this is, we will understand later why, because this is what will be the shift a little bit in the way how we tackle things. We won't be able in reality to tackle such urgent matter without breaking the barriers of being there and continuing and creating links and relationship with the people and being part of the community. So I do consider myself as part of the community there. And it's something that, of course, to be able to develop this kind of empathy skills that will lead to this deconstruction part of our things. Siwa Oasis also lives in the memories, even though you can see here is that there is a few interpretations. And this is one, Yusuf Ibrahim, he's one of the major activists in Siwa Oasis. He's a lever of change, and he's the one that most of the cases is in the battlefield, trying at a certain moment to acquire knowledge, and his knowledge is tremendous. He has a capability of analyzing and seeing and linking the past and the present and the future in a very, very holistic way. So the way how he, also the way how it has been represented through a different way, we see that these memories or this heritage, it has an echo in the creativity of people and in the way how they represent their environment. Even though that this environment, you will see, it's no longer existing. So it's something that it is kept in memory through stories. And of course, you have to know something, that they are not really the local language in Siwa, it's not Egyptian. They have the Amazighi, very specific type of language. So Siwa in reality, as a cultural landscape, views a significant interchange of human values over a span of time, from a prehistoric area to modern period. And this is, of course, has an echo on the development in this community architecture. I wouldn't say architecture with a big A, but the community architecture. And of course, it has a lot to tell about the urban development and spatial transformation that this part of the world is undergoing in a very short time today. So this is at the beginning, we saw, okay, what is said about Siwa. This is what you will have from the research. This is what everybody will tell you, that we need to save Siwa Oasis, and we have to, preserve this heritage, and we have to completely keep this unique way of indigenous lifestyle to be contained. And this is most of what planners and architects will be, invited to do and to reflect on with the decision makers. But in reality, and this is I really stress in my word, it's a forced criteria and guidelines to obey to the globalized knowledge of Siwan tradition and heritage. In reality, what we are witnessing It's a very forced way. We are forcing people to keep living in an era of time and with a kind of precepts of all Western people, what they see as a value through their eyes, and we kind of take it for granted. And us, and even the people who are living there, they have been convinced this is the way how you should be living with. And here, just to drag your attention about the dangers of what it is, and I will explain why. So, in reality, and indigenous communities, and which exist a lot, this is not a case only for us. You will see this case very common in USA and in East Europe and also in Canada, in specifically until today. So indigenous community, to give you more scientific explanation of it, how the United Nations describe it, its peoples and nations are those which having a historical continuity with the pre-invasion and pre-colonial societies that developed on their territories, consider themselves distinct from other sectors of the societies now prevailing on those territories or parts of them. And when you have the graphic on the right that you can see where in reality, if you are going there and even spending a year living there, you will never meet actually the real Siwian community. Siwian community, you have the Siwian community that takes you probably 10 years to know. And then you have an open strata of Siwian community that they will be the ones to receive you and talk to you and embrace, your will to help and to support and to develop things, and even as a visitor, as a tourist. And we have the international community that in a certain way, some of them are so much in love in Siwa that today they are part of the community. They live there for like 20, 30 years, and there are stories about that. And they embrace this culture and they embrace its transformation in itself. And of course, you have the Egyptian. And this part of the things, this is to just to drag your attention that when you have a map to read, don't take for granted your boundaries. Because in reality, it has another readings and another way. Instead of mapping things in a spatial way, you will map them more about people who are really in reality, you know, are open to your eyes and you can see it. There is 20,000 Siwin today who lives in the village, of course. And from these, I can tell you, you can see 1% of them, what we saw in the photos, and everything is very orchestrated. They have 10 tribes and one leader, and they have another system completely of local governance. And it's not an informal one, it's a very formal one. They have their own, codes of conduct, and they have their internal way of dealing with everything from justice, resources, etc. So they are a very close community who completely also, when we read, it's about, threatened, and this is what I wrote, actually, threatened by mondialization, etc. This is not a real reality. This is what we can see. But in fact, of course, it has its challenges and it has its potential threats internally. It's a community that needs a lot of support. There is a community that has a lot of changes happening, especially in the young generation, and of course, a lot of things that are happening towards that. So the Siwa in reality, which we call it here, another terminology to add to your dictionary, it's what we call them territorial community. They are part of beyond the boundaries that you can see administrative one or legal one. And this is, you have to acknowledge it, because if you don't take this diversity and this connection between the different communities, you won't be able to think, or even to say, okay, I will work on designing, on developing, on analyzing, etc. And the territorial community is an infrastructure body of people or homogeneous constituency that is physical, situated in localized ex-urban area. And this part of the things, I can draw here a huge line to combine them all together, because in reality, what you can see in Siwa, you would see it in Amazigh in Morocco, in Itargin down, and of course in north of Tunisia, not north of Tunisia, it's in our mainly south east of Tunisia and more down to the desert. And that's why I'm telling you that these kind of, I will not go through of that, but you can combine the layers. So now you can understand that if you put this and you add another layer, because they have connection in reality about it. And there is a lot to learn, for example, from Morocco, because they have their language written, which is not the case in Siwa. They know, they have the culture, they have everything, but they cannot really write in it or to transmitted to other outsiders, which is capable to be done in Northern Africa. So when you see this duality, what I tell, there is a lot of internal forces. And these internal forces and external forces are kind of action, reaction between the different one. And here's something that is very important in your field of studies and work. It's here a matter of land territorial governance. You won't be able to tackle such reconstruction or rethinking about rehabilitation or restoration or whatever the appellation, depending on the context, how you call it. It's how you will be able to understand the dynamics of governance and within an international scope, national scope, territorial scope, and local scope. And of course, here on and off record, what is said and what's not, because today, we hide it for 20 years, and today the things are growing since then, and we can't hide it anymore. So of course, the storytelling of SIWA has to change, and you can see that there is a lot of things that has been done, especially from universities and scholars. This is the real problem in reality, because we take it for, we don't consider the responsibility we have in saying the things as they are. So this is SIWA today, all right? And in reality, this is the photos, you very hardly you can find them. It's you are here facing the truth about how, of course, people need to find places to live. They have different needs. They have different approach to what the Western people are looking like it's saying, wow, I have a goosebump, it gives me chills. Yeah, sorry, but it doesn't give a chills for people who live there. So in reality, the way how we look at it, from somebody who's coming to spend 10 days, 5 days, 10 days of workshop, etc., it can be a very good, how we call it, safari. But for those who live, and this is one of the problem here, that no architect or no planners or no expert at whatsoever will stay, even it's originally from the SIWA, will stay there. And there is a huge lack of support of whatsoever to the people who live there. So they have, in reality, we are witnessing again a regeneration or a new ways of that the community restore its knowledge from scratch. But of course, from the scales of our lifetime, we won't be able to understand that, as we only capable of only judging the time line where we live. And here what you can see that, of course, the urban sprawl goes more and more to eat all what's around it as an environment, because this is not, a statement to say, oh, really, how the people can do. You can displace them. You can move them away and tell them, hey, look, I'm here to tell you that this is, of course, this is what will happen. Here you can understand a little bit my graphics about, the internal, external power relationship. And of course, this is the model when the people, of course, they are open to outside world, and it has a reflection of about also the urban pattern in Egypt and in most of the countries who lack financement and lack of knowledge about local needs, despite all the scientific knowledge we have. And the way that we failed in interpreting this and sustaining the real actors, when I said for those without a place, because in reality, these people, they have to create their own places and not spaces with the tools and the elements they do have. And they are actually within, it's not something to be understood in a rational way. So here, this is what you can see. This is an example of course, by the way, this is Adrer Ramela. It's the night, I think it can be gone to $2,000 the night. It's built by bricks. So if you go there and you are a little bit curious, you will scratch a little bit and you will see that behind the karshif, cladding, which is not supposed to be a cladding materials, it has bricks construction. So whatsoever the blah, blah, blah that we can hear about thermal, microclimate and adaptations and all the analysis that you can see, I can tell you from my side that all these analyses are quite wrong. So of course, there is a lot of scientific narratives to be part of your job to really recheck all and to re-question everything that you read. And of course, the salt materials, there is a huge exploitation, of the natural resources, which of course will lead to a catastrophe. Siwa, it's like a basin. It's 18 meters, on the sea level, and you can see that this is a huge catastrophe. So from what you can see, even the government, here you can see a public school on the left. And this is the public school that has been, of course, very pushed by GIZ, because they develop, they sustain, and they help and support the Egyptian government to develop quick solutions. We need every 3 seconds a school in Egypt. But here it's an example that even though you have policies, even though you have rules, even though you have things are applied in a very blueprint ways, because we are dealing with emergencies and we are dealing with necessities. And sometimes you question yourself saying, yes, but it could have been done differently. And this is you can see here the difference between what we've seen as pictures at the beginning, and when we zoom and we really try to frame certain part. But if we zoom out, exactly, this is what you can see from it. And of course, this is what led at the same time also that Siwa, it has been an tentative list from the UNESCO to be from the protected area. It can't be. And this is also something that we need to reflect about, that the criterias about how this area, which is really in need of attention, is because of certain actual context, transformation, that is also our responsibility from all what we have brought as mass tourism for the area, and from how we have a hand into that. So of course the people to the normal development, they will go next door and they will bring the nearest builder they can find, and they will also travel because we are no longer living in a very close area, and they will try to bring the example of other places. And as you can see, this is completely not what we see. And here what you see as an image, for example, it's the contrast between both. It's abandoned. You cannot live in such a place, even though that despite all the argument that you would say, and this is something also a lot, maybe it's not today to talk about it, but how much we are pushed in thinking that will work, and earth and construction, without having a real technological solutions. People have laptops today, people have other ways. They need to also live in a dignified spaces where they have acquired certain comfort, and obliging them to live in such a things, it's not acceptable. So this is a total landscape today of Siwa architecture or heritage, let's say heritage landscape. This is what I mean. And you can see that there is a huge problem. And the Shali itself, we are in Shali now, the view is from Shali. It has been restored even recently, and there is a lot of things that are done. And imagine that these things will be demolished just to reconstruct something that belongs a certain, memories of a Western people who comes to visit 2 or 3 times a year, despite the actual needs of the people to have something different. And of course, this is of course represented, it's very highly linked to the industry of materials. If you provide another alternative of materials that is also as good as the brick, as cheap as the Klein brick, as cheap as the cladding and the pipes, why not? I don't think that people would, be opposing such a thing. So in reality, there is today an activism happening from the elderly, from the generations that, of course, they've seen imagine the sadness they are encountering by having lived a lot of transformation in less than 30 years, and trying today to be very active towards preserving it, because here you can really touch this love for that memories. Because for example, here we said Muhammad Omran, he's one of the activists and founder of the local NGO. He knows what he's talking about, and he knows what it has to be maintained, and he knows that it's very important for his community. But for the young generation, who you can see in the middle, etc., they have been very tired about it, and especially the status quo of women, because there it will be, you have to be very, very, it will be a sign that you are accepted in the community if you are capable to approach their women. It means they give you the trust for that. And of course, the environmental disaster, you can see here what is going on. This is part of the things that you need to think about it. It's not about, thinking about, okay, we need to rehabilitate, we need to restore, we need to do, but I mean, we also talking about people, we talking not only about their memories and their knowledge and their costumes and etc etc etc, but we're also talking about, their basic needs, and this is something very crucial. And of course, when we all have this desire of having these sites to visit, etc., we don't consider also that this is have an impact. And you can see we are not in a model like in some, for example, European country will tell you that some of the budget that will comes in the decentralized system, it will goes back to the local. No, 70% of, basically 70% of Marsa Matruh governorate, it's produced by SIWA, but it doesn't go to SIWA. It's only less than 5% which goes back. So you have to understand also the very low dynamic about it. So going back to that, of course, a lot of people like us, like you, would go, will make workshops, will go to visit, and they have this knowledge. I mean, the community there, they are so much what we call them the tourism of knowledge in reality, because in reality, you bring people to study, to analyze, to get to reflect, to have solutions, and to think about it, and of course, go beyond that and test materials and so on. But of course, at the end, we're witnessing even now the latest 15 years, we keep producing a lot of amount of knowledge and things to be done. But as you see from the photos that I've shown before, nothing is really happening. So when we think about a model, when you think that you are the expert and you're coming to an area and you think that your knowledge and your analysis and so on will be beneficial, you have to re-question a little bit the context of it, because it won't have a continuity unless we will see later something needs to be rethought and we be, uh, uh, you know, um, consider it in the future. So we all agree that heritage is about something to which you feel connected to, all right? And we all know that it's not always a something good. We also battle over this thing. And of course, heritage should be anything inherited from the past and help us collectively, and I emphasize on the word collectively, or individually, to understand the present and create a better future. And when I see it collectively, it includes you as an international community coming for an area, even though you lived there before. So whose narratives are we really thinking about, talking about? You have to ask this question for you, for yourself. Whose experience are you trying to think about it, or to imagine, or to have this argument about it? And what really matters to the Siwian and those who are using the heritage as a shield in reality? It's a case, it's a very unique case where the heritage in itself, it's englobing them. It's not a part of a city, it's not a building, it's nothing. They live, they have their own main fake identity posed on them for years now, that the generation has to live with it on their everyday life, and feeling even guilty of doing, alterating into it. And it's something that a model that comes to them very clear where we participate. So when I say for those without a place and spaces of anti-fragility, I will explain for you that when you think about your own project, it's you have to say, okay, of course you are appealed and requested from your teacher, or in the future from, whatever the organization you are working with, you have to find solutions. Specifically for what? To plan, to design, and to develop methodologies, guidelines, and more policies. All right. And of course, here what we can say is it has a very specific context, that some of the cases you think that you know, but you don't know. And and you have to really question in reality your vision, your understanding of the things, your interpretations, and your purpose. What's your purpose? What brings you there? And the time that it's very crucial, because if you are intervening for 4 months, it's not the same as you're or for a lifetime living there for 10, 20 years. And of course, here, when you see that, it's you have to understand that people will and will always continue on claiming their own existence. And this is basically that there is a lot of all the time between, activating and battling between territories and the people. So what is said about Siwa and how it is represented, it shows you very clearly that we all the time talking about heritage protection of, heritage preservation of, heritage rehabilitation of. If you make a Google search now, you'll find it. But we find very little about heritage protection to, for, with, heritage preservation to, for, with, heritage rehabilitation to, for, with the Siwian community. And this is something that is completely where you, if you start in questioning yourself and position your words in a different context, you will see that you will need to require other tools, other ways of thinking, and you situate yourself as being a key player to become something different. And in reality, where Siwa it's happening today, it's between a coalition between tourism, social, economic, environmental, political development, and the community. And within that, you see that the community, what we said, it's a very broad community. It's very simple. Community is the people who have the same interest, whatsoever the interest is towards something. And this is what makes a community. So of course, when we talk about community, it will be communities according to interest. And more global and more holistic the interest you can find, more scaled your intervention and your way you're thinking is. And of course, this is all linked to, so you have a heritage then is different. The heritage in itself becomes a tool for social, economic, environmental, political development. You have a huge power. And today you are facing something that I tried to chart it here for you. And this is the global context, which we say global, because you are local and global at the same time. You're facing an imbalanced power dynamics. You are an age of anger of the youth, in specifically from the oppressed, from the vulnerable, like the women, etc., which at a certain level it will blow up on your face. And of course, there is a hegemonic knowledge. You cannot discuss it. You know, you're in a position to not discuss such things because we are in a colonial status quo. And this is something that a lot of people, it hurts them. They cannot consider it, but we are, our brain are wired to. And of course, the colonial science. So the colonial science has, of course, its benefits, but at the same time, there is a way that we would not be able to go over and find really solutions and thinking about the individual. And the heritage for heritage, this is where we are. Planning for planning, this is where we are. And design for designing, this is where we are. We are in the loop since now the 19th century. So actually, decolonizing the research and the process and methodology, this is not only me who's speaking it. There is a huge now wave of scholars who actually now we call them decolonizer scholars, who actually trying to deconstruct whatsoever and to go back a little bit to the basics. And here it's a nice quote that if you have time to really read it, despite significant universal progress in terms of recognition of diversity, cultural differences, intangible heritage, national and indigenous autonomies, and advances in living standards, cultural heritage as a set of practices has had inconsistent and a contradictory outcomes. It requires cultural heritage institutions to reflect and think about artifacts and sites within disparities and inequalities of wealth, poverty, and power, and to ask questions as who shapes the meaning of how we think, talk, and write, and implement plans to conserve, preserve, display, and inaugurate cultural heritage practices. And this is Shahid Vavda from Ikram. It's really, I will invite you to read it. You will see that a lot of people saying planning by definition is controlling. It's the first military tool that has been, and this is, I think you know it already. And of course, it leads us as being people who like a lot the predictable. And our brain is wired to be wired to have all the time a causality part. This is what we call them a determinism ways of approach. This is determinist, very determinist science. And why heritage matters, we shift a little bit to what people matter, okay? What matters for them. And the disciplines disciplinize us to discipline, all right? And architects and planners are all the time, they think that they are really heroic and very positive, and you have a very good intention. I don't, argue about it. But also we need to consider that we are part of the problem. We are part of the way how we think, and we reproduce the same things, not re-questioning them, and not taking responsibilities of the different blueprints that we are producing. And it's a very strong violence. Heritage is violent as much as, planification and architecture. So decolonizing our vision and our understanding and interpretation and our purpose is to be more into a position to be for and not against it. So it's very hard. It's really, I found a research talking about, intimacy, talking about feelings, talking about, other things. It's completely rejected while it's something that is very important. And we need to identify ways in which heritage can benefit or bring benefits to local communities. If you can't find that, it has nonsense. It won't matter. And that's why you will all the time complain whatever you can say, informality, spontaneous people, etc. It's like you are a mechanism against people. But because basically you cannot find a balance of bringing a real benefit, a solution that can really make the people reconsidering, reconnecting to where they are. And of course, between connecting this global and local and this external forces where you are today in this very international arena, so you have to question what forms of knowledge are we using to describe it, and how good is your language to describe it, from where you take these words and how it goes. And that's why you are all the time between these parts, and that's why even your tutors or professors are trying to push you further to go into deeply these type of research, because this is what can open up, deconstruct your ways of thinking. And this didn't happen, 30 years ago or 50 years ago. And that's why I told you about it. It's about to negotiate these legacies that you're talking about from your background, whether architects, social science, etc., into this part. I will not go deep into this part where it's talking more about the transmission of knowledge. We go here more into the process of how the things are built and knowledge. It's in reality to bring us more to bridge why I'm talking about spaces on anti-fragilities, and why anti-fragilities, it's something that I'm focusing on today, because in reality, the context where the word is, whether in in the western side, eastern side, south, north, etc., it's dynamic. We are 8 billions on the word. There is uncertainty. We are not on a context of stability or certainty, and it's all about a movement and development. It's not statics, and it's not so casual. It means you cannot make action reaction. The way how you think is, you think that if people drop the bin and put it, you see, it will create environmental disaster. We are wired to think that if the people throw the bin, it means that they don't have a bin in their house. And this is the lead us that we are in the loop of causality. In reality, it's not. We have to accept in our mind that sometimes it escapes us, and you can't anticipate. So planning by default won't help. It can organize your time, it can organize you, but it won't help in your practice. And that's why you are in a very huge dynamic between power, resistance, bad governance, informal, differences and clusters, clientelism, informal economy, marginalization, solidarity, momentum, regenerative process. If you remember a little bit my meeting about territory and people, we are into huge things. And of course, people, what they use in SIWA, they will use the heritage as a personal practice. Cities became the personal practice. The way how we read them, we call them in a very pejorative way. It's in a reality, this is what they do. And this is the anti-fragile process. This is the people, it's not even a resilience, it's beyond resilience, and you will see why. So in reality, this is why I like, Nassim Taleb, because when he said it, it's very clear here. I will not go because the time is running. Is the anti-fragile is beyond resilience or robustness. The resilience consists and resist to shocks and absorb them. This is what everybody talking, because today you will see urban resilience, and they're trying now to shift the science arena. They're trying now to contradict what they're saying. They couldn't find the word. But resilience by default is to go back to the state where you are. And this property is behind everything that has changed with time, evolution, culture, ideas, revolution, etc. To not go along that, anti-fragile is very simple. It's things that gain from disorder. It needs disorder. It loves chaos. It loves war because it creates regeneration, because this is the way how they exist. Okay? The time that everything is stable, they are indoctrinized. So anti-fragile, it would be able to benefit from events, perturbations, volatility, and disorder. And we are not rewired for that. And that's why a lot of artificial intelligence now that comes ahead, where we're trying more to create a way of learning from the shocks and response and to mutate in reality. So it is a system that has proven through history to be capable to adapt, self-organize, improve, and take advantage of the unpredictable, in short, to prosper in disorder. It's human settlements. It's one of the things that lasts, but it's not the individuals. Here you can see it's actually, you know, nature. This is what also he gives Nassim Taleb in his, example that people can understand it. If there is a crisis in nature, a catastrophe, what we should do, we should not save actually the strongest. We have to save the small, very fragile entities and species, because it's not about them, but as much as them and the process of all the time reacting to it, this whole system, the ecosystem is strong. So that's why informality is strong. That's why you cannot face it. That's why when we said since now more than 40 years, we cannot stop it. And in reality, when we see about this, sorry for that, it's actually we need spaces of anti-fragility to activate, to produce, to make it possible. And that's why some of the organization now, they started, instead of planning for 10, 20 years of big, huge projects, they go into what we call the fabric of a city, very small budgeting interventions, when they not plan, but interact with people. And that's why the system of anti-fragility is quite different. It's actually, you need to build the needed capacity of the local community to thrive in a volatile and uncertain environment. They will be the one to preserve their heritage. They will be the one to rehabilitate. They will be the one to find what has to be left and what has to be protected. And in reality, the best tools that we can have, and if we're lucky enough to be from a background of art, is this. The creative process, not creativity. The creative process is the way how people are capable of the brain in itself being in this process of anti-fragility. So what we're trying to do in SIWA very quickly, it's beyond what is seen. We try to base our ideas and our things of being all the time very acupuncture and very knowing that we have to stay, but we will not depend on us. And this collective knowledge that we said it's produced, you know, and reshape relationship in a very continuous way. You put people to interact, you go and dig deeper, you make the land in itself your arena, create a shock of civilization, create a shock of discourse, create a shock of, you know, building, testing, etc. Open the door that people comes to you. Let them all together tell you what is wrong and what is not, you know, because in reality, you have to admit that you can't really change anything. You cannot really, and from both sides, you create momentums. This is what I call it, creating momentums of anti-fragility to build this within this complex mechanism. And that people in a certain way trying to break up these rules and break up the things, because they are the ones who actually will stay. And they don't, even though you bring a fresh air, but at the same time bringing external elements, etc. And we need so much, a lot of other tools to think. We need to test, we need to find ways, like here, even the door people didn't accept it, they repent them again in Brown, but I mean, you give it, you try it, you make it, etc. And this is only a glimpse of what could be done within the scope of work. And of course, to deconstruct what you have and accept it. It's not by the law that it has to be done that way. People need stairs, people need to add few things, people have to exploration, but of course, this interaction should be part of it. So thank you very much. So I finished my presentation and I hope that I didn't take a lot of time.
Well, thank you, Insaf, for this very interesting presentation. I will open the floor for questions. So anyone would like to ask a question, just raise your hand, and maybe until people gather some courage to talk and to discuss about this. I would definitely want to ask you also, because being part of this amazing project was always great. Maybe it would be interesting also to reflect on how do you think about the interplay between big infrastructural projects, which is most of the rehabilitation projects need, in comparison with this small micro scale of activation of clusters of communities that want to resist and rebuild their own understanding of what heritage means to them and how it helps guide their everyday life.
I mean, the way how we develop this project, you have to understand that you are in an industry of development, an industry of business, it's entrepreneurial. But when you see about infrastructure, it's a way to drive money, etc. And it's not, the way how we think about it. If the money there, why not? But you have also to make sure that it's also for the benefit of people, which is most of the cases not the case. It's a way, under the slogans of heritage and under the slogan of development and under the slogan of, right to the cities, etc. We open basically a market. And the way how we look at it, it won't help the people who are really, you will see the scale of it, you will see the huge amount of money, and then what comes at the end, and the whole risk, because these projects, this is basically the concept of anti-fragility. It's a small action with small risks and small error, rather than having a lot of things, because the model that you gave is exactly a very, a neoliberal one. And we need to know the reasons why we do so. People, now we go back, because we are so much, we go back to closed communities. So communities will be recreated anyway in an endless way, and they have to acquire their knowledge, and there is a huge other distribution of power. Infrastructure, they omit the understanding of scale, they omit the understanding of people, and they are very top down. And some, of course, here we will be then discussing, a lot of let's say, matters of ethics and so on. Some people would say, yeah, but we need the top down. Some others would say, no, we don't need it. But in reality, if you really look to things that to have a coexistence of people, it won't work.
Anyone has any question, please feel free to come in.
Everybody's tired.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of information and a very new context to most of the people. But then you were also talking about threshold and this kind of, the ignored voices and the thresholds of interactions, and having different levels of thresholds and how these thresholds matter. But what do you think in a city setting this will, how do we learn from SIWA in a bigger scale, on a city scale?
I mean, SIWA, it also learned from others. It's a model that exists. It's the way how, of course, you all learn how you map your stakeholders. The way, that's why I all the time go to tools, because I do develop the tools and this kind of critical thinking methods. They have their weakness. In reality, the way how we look to things, we need to think and to learn how to analyze ecosystems. City is a system of systems. And if we are not understanding the relationship, because the system is what? It's two elements having a relationship. If you don't identify the nature of relationship, the connectiveness and the distance of it, and the interaction within that, you will be completely failing. And this is what is happening all the time. In reality, we are missing tools, and we are not understanding that we have already passed the state of analyzing 10 people. We are here dealing with a lot, and that's why you heard about numbers, because it's most of the people who gave us our tools, and a lot of people doesn't know them, are economists. So the economists using numbers to be able to analyze their data, and when we adopt that towards things that have social aspect, etc., we are completely misleading our ways of understanding it. And it's reversible, because people then react, and we created a huge kind of if the project succeeds, it's not because we planned them. If your project's very good and has an eco and impact, it's not because you planned it for. This is what normally Nassim Taleb is saying. It's a concave process of luck. It's your luck in reality. There are things that you missed, and happened that things in a certain context, they worked. And that's why all the time our evaluations of things are completely misleading. You can go now for all the reports everywhere in the world of all the big, small, medium projects. You analyze them, you will see the gap. And that's why we repeat the same mainstream words. So if you analyze the same with the same loop, you will see the same thing. You need another microscope.
Well, it is very interesting. I don't think, does anyone have any questions for our guest?
If we talk about also especially reconstruction after war, if people doesn't understand the war as a mechanism and the reaction and the complexity of it, and being able also to develop, this is what we're trying to work a lot, especially now with the ISD, is we work a lot on skills, personal skills. It means that the people have to learn now beyond the technicalities, how to be and how to think. Because in reality, we are maybe causing much more problems and you are not the very good candidate for. And that's why we're trying to a little bit to deconstruct the way how we teach and how we learn. Because, for example, the capacity to be the empathy, listening, analyzing, being able to get a very complex way of thinking. And this is some of the humanitarian and conflict resolutions, counselors have these skills. And we need them, of course, to bring that because there is a connection between. Nevertheless, we have to understand that the way how we learn planning and architecture and so on, they are not neutral. They have been designed to be instruments of war and colonization since the day they have been born. So the whole narratives that come from the word and everything, you can say that if you can see it now from what I'm saying and just question it, you will see that you will look to things differently. And that's why even the words are dangerous, saying rehabilitation, development, plan, it's quite different. And here, of course, there are other topics. When we say about participation, like I said, we are not the expert. We get be invited by. And that's why in most of the cases, we cannot have a real impact of what is going on the ground. There is a huge filtration process happening. And today, the crises that are coming up, this is how comes now with the COVID, we leave the time to heal by itself because we are waiting for people to take their natural reaction and self-organizing system, because in reality, we said we can't feel much. So.
It looks like you got a thumbs up from Gensrin. I'm not sure if the name is correct or it's a Zoom thing. So if anybody has any questions, I know Insaf that you have to go. Oh, okay, Asma, please go.
Hello.
Hello, hi.
Hello. Can you hear me, please? Well.
Yes, very good. Hi, Asma.
Can you hear me? Hello. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I loved it from the first to the last word. Very attractive, and it's related to my thesis. That's why I think that what you said has great benefit for me. I have a question. I don't know if in your realistic point of view, what is the role that the architects could do? You are talking about the communities, their role, what should they do? And the architects seem to have a negative role. So how can we as architects or urban designers make a contribution in this real hard problem to solve? This is the first question. And can we compare what you are saying with some other experiences or things that are done in reality? For example, the Korna village of Hassan Fathi. Can we compare what you're saying with such things that are done in architecture, or even in the experiment of Christopher Alexander in Japan, in the village that he designed? I would be delightful if you answered me to these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asma. And first of all, good luck with your thesis.
Shukran.
You will
Thank
not
you.
like my answer for the first question. I'm by definition an architect, so I've started as an architect. And I do believe now what I'm kind of activist in that field, that we don't no longer need architects anymore. If we really wanted to make an impact, we needed to make it democratized. It means architecture should be something that we learn as we learn mathematics, basic science, etc. Because it's a huge lobby, and behind it, it's a huge fake. We have so minimum impact of what is going on and what's happening in the world, because we are much more completely left aside. But there is, of course, that's why we shifted. Actually, there is what we call them a new generation since now 70, 80 years of people who actually we're trying to combine different hats at the same time. So what you can do in reality is, this is why you are here today, is actually will be anyway transforming your career and your shift. And what you need in the way is to be really re-questioning everything that you have been learning all the years behind you. And what you stating now, there is, of course, what we call them, some call that humanitarian architecture, which is some of my field, and social architecture. Some of them tell you no, architecture, which Layla and me always debate. We think architecture doesn't belong to architects, something different. And I can share with you some resources about it. I give a lecture about
Yes.
it, that architecture is beyond that. If we wanted to shift and redefine it differently, and based on resources of different, of course, cultures and the way how they look at it and different terminologies. The things is about, if you say how you can be, this is what I'm telling you, it's a deconstruction process. When you take the time to deconstruct, re-question, rediscover things, facts, analyzing them, and look to it, and knowing, for example, if you read the Orientalism, of course, automatically tomorrow you will see the word differently. You know, if you read the Orientalism, you will see how the word looked at you. All right, and this is, you will see even the people who wrote, even Hassan Fathy was very, very clever, because he knows what the Westerns wants to hear. So he wrote a book for them. It wasn't a book written for the Egyptians or for the Arabs. So in reality, you need to understand that. And he was a very good businessman. He has a deep thinking about it, but he has to, because he was also a politician, he has to play the game to get things changed. So you need to contextualize, you need to get a deeper knowledge about it. And of course, it will only happening by questioning. And this is the real work of a researcher. It's not really production of knowledge as much as re-questioning. Already we have so much knowledge to be re-questioned. So working with a community, and this is the question what you said, of course, it becomes today a very huge mainstream. There is a lot of things to be learned in terms of participatory approaches. Of course, there is a lot of cosmetic use of it, but there is also those who work correctly and within that. And this is, I will share with you a lot. There is a huge, what we call them community development project, community, working, co-designing, co-build, all what you can hear about it. But of course, there is a lot of, trash within that, that you need to select about what you all read. But in reality, there are a lot of literature actually from the 18th century that can help very much now. And this is surprising, because we go back to that. We go back to 18th, 19th century to reread again, to rediscover how the word, and to also, you will be surprised to know how science have been written. So this is, I will leave it for you to understand, to be shocked about what you got. And of course, field work is to get out from the office and be with the people. And that's why I'm telling you, architecture should be completely leaving universities, no longer there. That's why you have so multiple now masters and stuff, because it has no sense. It's a war now against the architect in itself, by some architects and others outsiders, but you will discover this arena of people. It's now everywhere happening. The second thing about Hassan Fathy is the example that you gave. It's a testing, it's a trial, you have to contextualize it in a state where they need to, he has been gifted by power. He was minister, and he was also very, well placed to get this. I will compare him a lot with the Corbusier, So in reality, here we are really in the mainstream talk of narratives of architects rather than architecture. What is really good about it, and a lot of people didn't like it, but he was right about it, it's actually architecture for the poor. It's not architecture for people. It's people who cannot afford. And this is the main thing that a lot of people goes back to him. And he didn't he has to work, make architecture for people, for rich people, to be able to pay his time to do something for. And that's why a lot of discussion happening today about the charity. A lot of NGOs like ours, for example, we work a lot, and we are majority architect, but we have different hats and we work really with the community. And that's why with children, etc. And you can see a lot of gateways like placemaking, a lot of terminologies now are there, but they all talk about the same things. It's about actually empowering people and sharing that knowledge to create collective intelligence. So architecture is shifted today to be more in sort of an intelligence, which should be a collective one, a sharing knowledge process, rather than, so your role is no longer a designer as much as being a moderator. So here you are a moderator, you are a facilitator, and then the question is, what kind of skills I should acquire to be such? And that's why what I'm telling now, it's not new, because it's almost have its own science today. And of course, there is a lot of it's built up as a core practice. So it's something emerging and structured and has its own market as well. So yeah. So good luck again with your thesis.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time.
So
any other questions? I think everybody's afraid to ask questions, more or less.
no, it's fine. You can send questions actually by email.
Hi, Leila.
Dr. Dargham, please go.
Hi, how are you? So I'm getting back to the question of Insaf. Hi, Insaf. Thanks for your interesting presentation. So what kind of skills that we should acquire or have nowadays? This is your question.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'm longing to hear.
Question,
okay.
Yes, this is what we said about that the architect needs to be more acquire skills of moderator and facilitator beyond. And design actually became the language of participation. This is what we do. So it became an instrument, it became a common ground because it has this faculties to bring people, to resolve conflicts and to moderate and bring people all together around the common thing. So the skills that you learn, it's conflict management, it's listening, it's being moderator, it's how to contain dialogue. The tools that you create, there are different tools, and it's not you who bring people to design for them, it's actually you are taking part of a kind of process of creation knowledge. And this is, in reality, it has much more impact when it happens because you have much more durability and sustainability if we're talking in that scope. So of course, more than the knowledge you have, what I say more, I will rephrase it differently. What are the skills that you should give away? I would say, take away the fact that you are a designer. You are no longer the designer. So basically you can have that knowledge, but you are more there as, that's why you encourage more for the students, the teamwork and the exchange and the debates and working more as an intellectual part and the dialogue rather than that. And of course, being on the field, because these skills are very experienced fields. Staying in an office, being there, you will never have the same understanding of what you read if you are not really in the battlefield. So, and it's real battlefield, yeah. I hope I answered the question.
Oh, of course, I agree as well.
Well, Munaf, I think I provoked everybody when I said scared. Please, Munaf.
One last question, and yes, one last question because I have a small little girl waiting for her mommy.
Thanks, Ms. Insaf, for this interesting presentation. For myself, I find it a little bit different from other lectures we have been given last weeks. Some of the queries, if you allow me to raise them. Is this area registered in somewhere, UNESCO or WHO, World Heritage Organization? I believe there is, for sure, there is some researches have been done on this area. So when I heard the presentation, I found that this might give many directions for other researchers, architects, planners. One of them is this area is to be developed for their own people, to encourage them to be there and increase in numbers and settle down and give them the services required and give them the services needed nowadays? Or shall this area be a part of the tourist interest relevant authorities, and this will act sometimes adversely to the benefit of the people of Siwa, because then you will think about the how to reach to this area, the traffic, the network, the services, the communal activities may be required there, and this, although it is to the benefit of it is a public benefit, however, it might sometimes work adversely to the benefit of the locals. Some of the researchers may go not to this side or that side. Maybe some of the architects will make use of the planning way or the design way or the technique or the features have been. When we see some of the buildings, you present them, really it reminds us with what Hassan Fethi have done in terms of the style, features. And what you have said that the material, local material could be sand, silica, and those things. Nowadays, we are using these things in new technologies. Really, we have, for example, the GRC simply is something like this material. It's a silica and some of the minerals and some a new material, and we make something like this exactly. But the only difference is the molds, maybe how they be cast in molds and those things. So one of the researches, maybe beside the other I just mentioned now, how to develop the techniques and the material in a little bit more developed methods. In Iraq, really, there is a lot of areas, rural areas, live like Siwa people and build like them. Maybe some of the material maybe differ. So I believe this presentation will found for several directions and researches. They came to my mind, and maybe there is another thoughts and ideas. Yeah. It is really rich and interesting.
Yes. So yeah. Thank you very much for this. In reality, because the time didn't allow us to do, there are a lot of researches about Siwa, and it has been also laboratory development of local materials and to improve it. Many universities, especially between Germany, Egypt, etc., they work on Siwa with the also local authorities. Since '94, only the listed, or let's say pinpointed monuments have been put in the list of tentative list of World Heritage of the UNESCO. There will be published an article soon on the Heritage Watch, I think the 6th of June, that I co-authored with a colleague of mine, Mohammed Badi, about Siwa itself, where we propose such solution, not about what I've said, but more about creating a body that can connect all the actors about it. The thing that I didn't omit to say, that there is a lot of attention on the oasis, but they are not synchronized. The initiative that we're trying to conduct was about creating a platform from all this knowledge to be driven all together in one core place, and where it can be analyzed, shared, developed for the benefit of the Siwian. Because it's been now 40 years, we have a huge amount of knowledge. I mean, if you can see, and Layla has access to, she was the one to collect the majority of them. It's in reality, you can have analysis, things, and also restoration. There are projects of restoration, project of rehabilitation, participatory project, etc. There is a huge gap that happens, is that these things are not connected to each other. They are not, let's say, synthesized. They are not very, made in a very holistic way. And of course, there is a lot of authorities in the Egyptian side. You would be surprised by knowing that even the ownership of the different part and so on, and the administrations that are not knowing who is who responsible of, it's quite surprising. So there is a lot of work to be done in terms of territorial governance, a lot of work to be done by all the scholars and interests, that instead of doing without any responsibility, to have a hub through which they all come for the benefit of its development. And as you can say, that even these materials and learning from other regions, how they develop, it needs to be centralized. So of course, I would be glad to share all of this with you. And of course, the small article that will be published, talking a little bit, highlighting these gaps in more specific way, and especially from the UNESCO, why the UNESCO, at the same time they have the financement a lot at several times, but they are redundant about it, because as you can see, damages happened on many levels. So they don't really know their role, what role to play within that. So it's up to the locals really to defend their own, the oasis.
Insaf, we have a couple of questions still, but I don't know about your little kid.
Okay.
Okay.
So I can take maybe one, or go ahead. So it's I can have like around 5 minutes.
Okay, so I will quickly read Mirna's question and then I will allow Muhammad to ask. So back to back, and then you can answer them all in 2 minutes. So first, Mirna, who you know, she participated with us in Hosh in Alexandria, but she's asking about first that it's very inspiring for her, and the momentum of anti-fragility is very inspiring for her. So the question for her is, so I'm reading this, that inspired me on 2 levels. Can as a
yes.
Okay, then you can read it and answer.
Hi Mirna. Hi Mirna. As an Arabic terminology, in reality, even in English, it's not a word as a real word. It's really comes up since 2002. It has been very rarely. Now it comes on the table, because in reality, it's the concept of what is fragile, and the opposite of it is not robust. In reality, it's something else. So the unique word that comes is anti-fragility. It's غير قابل للكسر. Basically, you can say that قابل للكسر. So in reality, العربي, it's القابل للكسر.
I think also you can say الهش, fragile is
الهش, or it's capable of being able, because in the way how it's presented as a concept is actually you advise people to make it, to break it down. So it's actually please do قابل الكسر, so do it. So this is the way how it is presented, and of course I will share with you the references. I will be glad to do so, that you can understand more about it. And there are a lot of videos of Nassim himself explaining that concept in a mathematic way, because it's something more related to the finance world, but it's also belonging. And now it's used a lot in the artificial intelligence for infrastructure and transportation that are used a lot by the industry companies. So that's why I said that there is, from your perspective, how we can manage this in reality. As I said, it's a huge construction site. It needs a lot of change in the way the actors, and at the same time sustaining the activities going beyond. That's why art today and culture, you can see it's already happening. You have much more funding for art and acupuncture and activities, because these open the door for anti-fragile ways, for spaces for activism, for places where people can really speak up, for clashes, etc. Because we realize that all what you're trying to do is actually mobilizing people and to acquire knowledge, and that they all the time having this capacity of all the time adapting and readapting, by also taking our a little bit our romanticizing the concept of this memories and so on, because we go very much deeply into preserving and thinking that this will be lost, while in reality we will never control it and decontrol side of it. So that's why it's even in your research, Mirna, you have to get this part of also, especially that from Europe, etc., to analyze also the difference and how things are transformed. Many of you will think in Europe things are controlled, but they are not. There's so more that is happening beyond what is seen. So
maybe the last question from Muhammad, and then we will promise let you go.
Go ahead. No problem. Yeah.
Muhammad, please.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Leila. How are you? Thank you, Ms. Insaf, for everything, for your worthy information. Actually, my question is based on your information. Is there any specific vision through city structure plan or objectives that could formalize Siwa Oasis as a land use management or development master plan, or it's like just spontaneous efforts from people or local architects? Because as we know, studies or researches like dreams only before to work on them effectively. So what do you think?
The Egyptian government has something that is also very special. He works very closely with the universities. So universities they have departments, they work exclusively with the government in planification and planning. And of course, those who teach at the same time, they're also decision makers. In SIWA, there are plans and there are development and there are even, you know, a lot of, how we call them, principles of preservation. That's why the unique things is about, first of all, you cannot access the data that easy. So you need really to be locally and to be part of a project, as SIWA has a very strategic site, especially military wise, and the conflict, we are in areas all the time that are very, very sensitive. The second thing is the planning and the tentative to have. We are dealing, it's the same problem. We are dealing with emergency and very non-static status quo. So from one year to another, you can have, you know, demography will explode, and you have, it's not controllable. The same thing that is happening as well in each cities where there are plans, and the time that you finalize your plan and going through all the administrations and the procedure. That's why I told that it needs a lot of reform in the way planning is happening, even in, you know, because we adapted a planification tool from the 19th century of European cities, and we keep consuming knowledge without thinking about our own context. In Europe, they have a population that is decreasing. In ours, we have an increasing population. In them, they have, of course, a lack of resources, so they try in different ways. This is a whole about foreign affairs and so on, but you see the pattern, how they go. They don't have, they plan, they develop the tools that is valuable for them, and they don't have any problems to changing them. The problem is when you take something and you spend so much money as well, because it's a market, to implement it, and then it finds out that it doesn't work. So what you will be doing next? The same happening with our smartphone, our laptop, our cars, our buses. We wait for things to come rather than to be self-producing, self-thinking about how it's planned. And this is what leads to today that, of course, we are inviting people to just, you know, rethink, redo, recontextualize, and make things local. And to answer your question, this work happened, but of course, it's the same problem that happens for the other Egyptian cities and other cities in Africa and Middle East and so on, dealing with the same context of SIWA. She's facing at the same time global problems and challenges, at the same time facing national problems that are also existing in other cities, and at the same time internal ones. So the complexity is quite intriguing. The things to be done, this is what I'm saying, is actually you have to tailor your tools. And this is happening with a lot of acquiring of knowledge, but experience sharing. It's a huge work that could be done in reality. It is possible to be done. But if you do it alone without the community, because the community, you gain time. With the community, you make things change drastically. You make a lot of things that are happening much more efficient, rather than waiting, you know, and going back to this policies. To change a law, you need sometimes 30 years for that. And in a context, you know, decentralization, etc., you have to really understand that the mechanism sometimes, even the UNESCO and the United Nations, they suffer from that, from this problem. And we hope that people are also more and more interested, because of course we need a lot of financement and funding for these people who are ready to work on SIWA, because being remote at the same time doesn't help, and also help at the same time, because otherwise it will be something transformed since a long time ago. But also it's a problem because we can't bring expertise on time and services on times, etc. It could be people, it's very harsh environment to live in the majority of the year. So it's the same problem that we face in many remote areas in the world and sensitive places. You're welcome. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Insaf. Yes, I think you have also highlighted so many times about the importance of community mobilization and also awareness campaigns within the community itself to recognize their vernacular architecture. Sometimes when you go and just talk about it, as we saw in a lot of cases in SIWA, we activated a lot of people who just didn't want to be there. And that was an amazing experience. And I must admit to everybody that working with Insaf in Egypt was a life-changing experience for me. And hopefully it will affect a lot of upcoming things. So thank you, Insaf, for your time, for your presentation, and also for the life-changing things that has happened all along the way. And hopefully we're waiting for more and more to come. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And hopefully, Thank you very much. And good luck with Sarah. And hopefully we all, thank you everybody for attending this presentation. I will send the recorded presentation